Happy to be joined now by senior football writer and analyst for The Ringer. It is one Kevin Clark joining us on the show. Kevin, thanks for spending some of your quote-unquote down NFL time on the calendar with us. It's the time where everybody's trying to recharge the batteries. So thank you for giving us some of your time during that period. You have been very busy, though, cranking out the content. I know you talked to Josh Allen recently. He was a guest on your Slow News Day podcast. What was your biggest takeaway from him in the time that you spent regarding the outlook for 2023?
Well, there's a couple of things. What's interesting to me is seeing, this is my 10th year covering the NFL, seeing how a star develops over his first 4 or 5 years in the NFL. And Josh is so comfortable doing the media stuff, so comfortable with the expectations of being a franchise quarterback in that region and kind of knowing what that all encompasses. And it's almost like he's another team spokesman, right? So it's interesting to sort of pick his brain about what he thinks the expectations are. They're high. We know that. It is probably one of the hardest ever eras to have high expectations in a conference when you look at the AFC, where not only do you have the folks who were really good last year, you're adding Aaron Rodgers into that division, let alone conference. It's going to be a tough road to hoe, but he was totally comfortable with it. I thought the most interesting thing that we talked about was the push and pull between changing as a player, maybe not taking as many hits, maybe not taking as many risks, with being able to still be Josh Allen. I think that's going to be something that he struggles with his entire career. Patrick Mahomes still struggles with it. I think the way you want to play, the way that, I think both Josh and Patrick are similar in that they play a very almost childlike game, right? What I mean by that is it's the way you'd play if you played in Pop Warner. If we all could, and we all had the size and the strength and the throwing arm, we would play like those guys. But how do you manage that over the course of a career? Brandon Beane told me last year, the one thing that he gets on Josh about is taking those extra hits and trying to truck Kyle Van Noy for no reason. But Josh likes doing that. So the adjustment period, is going to be ongoing. But I'm intrigued to see how it all develops.
You spoke about the expectations on him and on this team this season. I mean, the AFC East is not going to be an easy division to win. The Dolphins are better. The Jets have Aaron Rodgers, and we know Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers are buddies outside of football. I know he spoke about playing against Aaron Rodgers and their relationship on your podcast. So what did he have to say about that?
Well, first of all, breaking news, Josh Allen does get his FaceTimes answered by Aaron Rodgers, which he, as Josh said, that's not true for everybody, including maybe some of Aaron's old employers. But Josh and Aaron are buddies. They talk. Obviously, I think a lot of those high-level quarterbacks talk, and sometimes they golf together, all of that stuff. It's no surprise they have a relationship. I think Josh has spoken about how much he adored Aaron growing up. Remember, the style of play that Josh does as far as using his legs, using his brains, using a huge arm, a lot of that was what Aaron was doing 15 years ago now, God world. But I mean, you just think about when he first broke onto the scene after sitting on the bench for 3 years, Aaron Rodgers was unbelievable and a kind of a sign of things to come for what the NFL would look like. So I think generally he's excited about it. He said it was going to be a dogfight. I don't think that's going to surprise anybody. That defense in New York was really, really good. I was actually looking at some of the numbers sort of incidentally last night about that defensive line and the front seven and how talented they are. Sauce Gardner is one of the best cornerbacks in the league, let alone young cornerbacks. So all you do is add a two-time, 1 year removed from being the back-to-back MVP, to a really good defense that would have made the playoffs. I think they were 7-4 last year. Then they just kind of collapsed. They had some quarterback issues. Obviously, we all saw those. You add one of the best players to ever play the game to the quarterback position. Even though I think the floor is a little lower than maybe Jets fans think, or maybe even the Jets think. I think the floor is a little lower because I didn't love seeing some of the stuff I saw Aaron Rodgers last year. We just know they're going to be much improved. In that division, there's 3 teams there that have legitimate contender status. I think Miami, if everybody stays healthy, Mike McDaniel showed a lot of promise on the offensive side of the ball last year. Vic Fangio is an elite defensive coordinator, elite defensive mind. They have talent on that side of the ball. They put resources there. So you're looking at 3 teams that, frankly, wouldn't surprise me if we see them in the Super Bowl.
I know we're a ways off from week 1, but since we've mentioned Jets-Bills, let's just dive into that Monday night week 1 thing. From this perspective, Kevin, we know the New York hype machine can very quickly get out of control and fill any New York fan with visions of very unrealistic expectations. And then when those aren't realized, that fan base then turns on their own team and tries to eat them for dinner. So week one, 9/11, Monday night. I mean, there's going to be NFL pomp and circumstance beforehand to honor, the 9/11, honoring it, respecting it, never forgetting all of that. And then all of the buildup to this season with Aaron Rodgers. I'm wondering how it's going to look if they're down 13-0 in the second quarter. Is it going to get ugly? Like what could we be walking into there if it doesn't go well early for the Jets?
It's a great question. I would urge Jets fans to have a little patience, and I know that they don't want to, because it's so funny. I don't mean to make fun of Jets fans. People do that all the time. I think Jets fans are good. I think the Jets organization has made them look bad. There have been a handful of times where they've come at me because I said the Adam Gase, Sam Darnold thing was never going to work, or that it was a bad job a couple years ago and they gave Mike McCagnon an extra draft, which he botched. Even last year, one of my podcasts said that Zach Wilson was never going to be as good as Jameis Winston. So this was 2 years ago. And everybody went, hundreds of people in our DM sending whatever. And it's like, well, they hadn't learned yet that the Jets were not a high-functioning organization, and that they needed somebody like Aaron Rodgers to come in and solve their problems. I just think that the Jets, over the last, I'd say 20 years, it's been more it's been the exception, not the rule, when they have a successful season. I don't know, they're just not one of the top franchises in the NFL. And so I think what's happening now, and talking to Jets fans around the tri-state area where I live, is there's this release, and they're saying, okay, everything's going to change now. Next year is here. All the things they've wanted to say. The thing I want to urge them is, if it gets rough in September and it takes a little bit to click, and I think that there's some high expectations and some progress, I think, because Aaron is locked in with OTAs and mini camps, and he'll obviously be there for all training camp as he normally is. But if it takes a little bit to click, if chemistry isn't there in September, Aaron Rodgers, it takes a lot to earn his trust as a receiver. If they start 2-2 or 1-3, just remember the sky isn't falling. That's the most important thing. I wish I could go door to door at my neighborhood, guys, and just say, if you're a Jets fan, calm down, because it might be a tough road to hoe, because we've seen it in the past where Aaron Rodgers has taken September and October to sort of get the offense under him, get the personnel under him, and then he takes off in the second half of the season. We've seen that time and time again. So I'm with you guys. I think that there's going to be sort of the air might come out of the building with Jets fans on that first Monday night if the Bills go out to a two-touchdown lead. The most important thing is realizing that this is a long-term investment at quarterback.
So while the Jets are the hype machine this year of the AFC East, the Bills have kind of taken a step down in that regard. I mean, last year, the hype for the Bills was out of this world. And I know this team kind of feeds off of kind of being underdogs. And maybe they get a little bit more of that this season. And Josh Allen has talked about, when he came back for OTAs and mandatory minicamp, the window that this team has to do something, has to win a Super Bowl. How much or how long do you think that window is still going to be open for? And when you look at the roster that they have this season, how wide open is that window for them this year?
I will borrow a quote from Joe Burrow, another AFC star quarterback, who said that the championship window is as long as he's there. I think that's true of Josh Allen. And I think it's true, by the way, of pretty much every top AFC quarterback, whether that's Mahomes, and obviously Rodgers, we'll have to see. But there's a lot of good quarterbacks in the AFC right now. But as long as Josh Allen's there, they have the chance to win the Super Bowl. That's the ceiling that he has. This roster is really good. They really went all in financially on Von Miller this time last year. He gets hurt. That changes the trajectory of everything, basically. But contract-wise, this core, it needs to be soon. There needs to be a push soon, because the blessing and the curse of having a good quarterback and good young players is that you have to pay them. And so you start, Dalton Kincaid could be a really incredible piece. I love year 2 of Ken Dorsey. So they're in the mix here. I think that, unfortunately, from a hot take prognostication standpoint, it's hard for me to say anything other than there's 4 or 5 teams at the top of the AFC, and it's going to come down to injuries, luck, and just a couple of career seasons from a couple of B-plus players on the roster. That's all that's basically the differentiation between the Chiefs, the Bills, the Bengals, some of these teams. And so it's going to, I mean, even I think the Broncos will be much improved. I think Justin Herbert and the Chargers could have a nice little run. So it's going to be so hard to stave them off. But Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane making the decisions, the talent on this roster, they're always going to be in the mix. And I think you're going to see double-digit wins as the floor. And then from there, it comes down to the things I talked about.
Last one for me, Kevin. You had a fun question on one of your podcasts about NFL teams being able to wear throwback uniforms more often. There is a segment of the Bills fan base that is obsessed with seeing the red helmets make a return at some point in time. So I'm not just talking about jerseys here. We know that the league is pretty strict and you got to jump through a lot of hoops just to get clearance to wear it for one game or two games and, the color rush jerseys and all of that. But I remember when they were wearing the old AFL jerseys back in 2009 when it was like the 50th anniversary, of the AFL. Those things were sweet. Could you foresee a time where the league maybe relaxes that a little bit?
They have relaxed a little bit of the helmet rules, but I would love to be able to see a lot of delving into the history. I do think for as much as America loves football and it's the only thing they still watch en masse, I do think there's a lack of appreciation of the sport's history. And I think throwback uniforms are a nice little entry point into, hey, what was the deal with this team? What was the deal with this team that made the AFC title game 40 years ago, whatever it may be? I love that element of it. And seeing these different uniforms, you see with college football a lot, where they'll say, hey, we're going to wear these in tribute to the 1920-17 team or whatever it is, if you're Notre Dame or you're Michigan or you're one of those teams. And so I love that just from an appreciation of the history standpoint. I think it's a cool little nod. And also some of these uniforms just look cool. I mean, there's a reason that Bills fans you mentioned are clamoring for that helmet, or that in Tampa Bay they're clamoring for Buccaneer Bruce to come back, which it sounds like he is. The creamsicle uniforms will be back this year. Like, that's the part of a fan base. I'm a huge Orlando Magic fan. I would empty my bank account if they went back to those old 90s jerseys permanently, buying every single different version that's possible. That's all I care about is that uniform. And so it's a nice little nod to nostalgia. It grounds people in the past and things that they remember. So I'm hugely in favor of throwback uniforms.
One more for me. Sean McDermott will be calling the plays here this season. He has been a defensive coordinator before, obviously. Is there anything that you want to see from Sean McDermott as he becomes the DC of the Bills defense this season?
I don't expect a huge change, only because when you're the DC, or when you're a defensive head coach, you're also kind of the DC, unless you really relinquish it. The defense was second in points last year and first before that. I don't expect a huge change, frankly, with anything. They still have the personnel there. They still have a lot of talent, and Sean McDermott's done it with some really good teams and some really good situations. So that's that. I normally love to see a DC just in place, just because I think I've heard coaches talk about what's called the 3 a.m. rule, which is, when you wake up at 3 a.m., you need to be thinking about one thing. And if that's defense and being the head coach, sometimes that gets a little bit confusing. But I think one of the last people I'm worried about is Sean McDermott calling the defense.
Kevin, thanks for the time as always. Enjoy your summer. We'll catch you out at Bills training camp.